every generation believes its money will last. That what they've earned, saved, and built is safe, protected by law, by banks, by governments that promise stability. But history whispers a different story. From gold coins melted into worthlessness, to paper notes used as wallpaper, to modern citizens locked out of their own savings, every financial collapse starts the same way, with trust. The trust that money, this fragile symbol of value, will always mean something. But what happens when that trust breaks? When the numbers in your account stop representing anything real? What survives when money fails? Before money, there was barter. Grain for cattle, tools for salt, a world built on direct exchange. But barter had limits. It depended on coincidence. You needed what I had, and I needed what you had. So civilizations created something else, a symbol, something that represented value, but wasn't value itself. Shells, metal coins, later stamped silver and gold. This was humanity's first leap of faith that everyone would agree these tokens meant something. The ancient Lydians struck the first standardized coins around 600 BCE. Rome perfected the system, backing its denarii with silver mined from Spain. And for centuries, it worked. But as empires grew and wars drained treasuries, rulers discovered a dark temptation. You could stretch the value of your money by changing what it was made of. Debase the silver, add a little copper, keep the face value the same. It was the first financial illusion. And like every illusion, it worked until people looked too closely. In the 3rd century CE, the Roman Empire faced chaos, plagues, invasions, political assassinations. The treasury was empty. The empire still needed to pay its armies. So Rome did what nations still do today. It printed more money. The silver denarius, once 95% pure, fell to just 5%. Coins that once shone bright turned dull and green with copper. Prices soared, trust vanished. Merchants stopped accepting imperial coins. Soldiers demanded payment in goods, not money. And Rome, the greatest empire on earth, began to barter again. What collapsed wasn't just an economy. It was faith. Faith in the symbol that had once held Rome together. 1,000 years later, another invisible force reshaped money: death. The Black Death wiped out half of Europe's population. Labor became scarce, wages doubled, then tripled. Kings tried to freeze prices by decree. It didn't work. For the first time, power shifted from the wealthy elite to the working class. Money's meaning changed, not because of a law, but because the balance of survival changed. Out of catastrophe came capitalism's first heartbeat. And Europe, forced to rebuild from ashes, discovered that wealth wasn't in gold, it was in people, production, and resilience. As trade exploded across continents, carrying gold became dangerous. So merchants began using notes paper IOUs, backed by real metal stored in vaults. At first, these notes were simple receipts. Then, something extraordinary happened. People started trading the paper itself. They trusted the promise. The first central banks were born institutions like Sweden's Riksbank and the Bank of England, guardians of that trust. But every guardian faces temptation. Wars, revolutions, and deficits tested the system. During the French Revolution, the government printed assignats, paper money, backed by confiscated church land. It was genius, until it wasn't. Within years, the assignats collapsed to zero. Inflation hit 13,000%. People burned their money for heat. Once again, faith, not just currency, was destroyed. Fast forward to the 20th century. The world rebuilt itself after 2 world wars. The United States emerged with most of the world's gold. So in 1944, global leaders met in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, and designed a new system. Currencies would be pegged to the US dollar, and the dollar would be pegged to gold. For the first time, the world shared one anchor. But as America's spending ballooned, Vietnam, social programs, Cold War arms races, the gold backing began to strain. By 1971, foreign governments started demanding their gold back. President Richard Nixon closed the gold window. Overnight, the dollar was no longer backed by gold, only by trust. It was the biggest monetary experiment in human history. An economy built not on metal, but on belief. Without gold to restrain it, money became infinite. Governments could print, borrow, and inflate at will. And for a while, it worked. Technology boomed, credit expanded, home ownership, education, and consumption exploded. But the same pattern returned: expansion, excess, and collapse. The Asian financial crisis in 1997, the dot-com bubble in 2000, the global financial crisis in 2008, and the pandemic stimulus of the 2020 seconds. Each time, the system broke. Each time, the response was the same: print more money to fix the damage caused by too much money. Debt soared past global GDP. Central banks became the world's largest asset owners. And ordinary people, savers, workers, families, saw their purchasing power quietly erode. The illusion of safety grew stronger, even as the foundation weakened. When currencies fail, the charts and numbers fade away. What remains are human stories. In Weimar Germany, people carried wages home in wheelbarrows. In Zimbabwe, a $1 trillion note couldn't buy a loaf of bread. In Lebanon, citizens woke up to find their savings frozen, banks barricaded, and their middle class erased overnight. Every time, governments promised recovery. Every time, people learned the same lesson: paper promises burn fastest. And yet, from every collapse, survivors emerge. Farmers who kept land, craftsmen who kept skills, traders who held real assets, things that didn't vanish when digits changed. Across history's collapses, Rome, France, Germany, Argentina, Lebanon, a pattern repeats. When money fails, four things endure. First, skills. The ability to produce, repair, or create something others need. Second, real assets. Land, tools, and resources that hold utility beyond currency. Third, networks of trust. Communities, families, trade partners, because in crisis, cooperation replaces contracts. And fourth, adaptability. Those who can pivot, barter, and reinvent, they survive when systems don't. Money may vanish, but value never does. It simply changes form. Today, debt is higher than at any point in recorded history. Governments owe more than they produce. And central banks, the same institutions meant to protect currencies, now create trillions with keystrokes. Meanwhile, technology adds new layers of illusion: digital payments, invisible money, AI-driven markets trading faster than human thought. But at the core, the system still runs on one fragile thing: belief. Belief that governments will repay their debts, belief that banks will stay solvent, belief that your digits mean value. History tells us that belief is always tested. The question isn't if, it's when. Look closely, and you'll see history rhyming. The Byzantine solidus, once the world's hardest currency, debased to nothing. The assignats of revolutionary France, born from crisis, died from overprinting. The US dollar, now the world's reserve, facing the same temptations every empire has faced before. Every empire swore its money was safe. Every generation trusted its savings would last. And every time, history proved them wrong. 1. Money is a story of trust, not value. It survives only as long as people believe the story. 2. Real wealth comes from what cannot be printed. Skills, assets, production, relationships, these hold value when digits don't. 3. Collapse is not the end, it's a reset. A brutal but necessary reminder that systems are temporary, but human resilience is permanent. When you look back through history's wreckage, coins corroded by time, paper faded to dust, one thing becomes clear: money is the most powerful story humans ever told. But every story needs belief to survive. And belief can vanish faster than ink can dry. So ask yourself, in a world of infinite printing, digital currencies, and promises built on promises, what will still hold value when the story ends? What survives when money fails? If you want to understand how these patterns keep repeating and how to protect yourself by understanding history, not just markets, then subscribe, share the story, and remember, money can be created, but value must be earned.